Welcome to Psych Cinema, where we break down the psychology found in today's popular cinema. I'm Jonathan Hedderly, your host. I am a licensed professional counselor, and I am a movie lover. And today, we're going to break down Rogue One, a Star Wars story. I'm going to dive into some of the psychology found in the film, but first let me do a brief synopsis and give you an overall take of the film. It really centers around a ragtag group of rebels that have to steal the plans to the Death Star before that weapon becomes operational, where it can destroy an entire planet. And so you get to meet the various characters on the team, and in the process, several of them either make peace with their past or find redemption for some of the acts that they've done for the cause of the rebellion. Now, believe it or not, this was one of my favorite Star Wars films, and partly because it really kind of is a tangential story that pays homage to the original trilogy without being restricted by some of the characters that have appeared repeatedly in some of the Star Wars films. So I highly recommend it, and no, it's not just because there's Asian characters found in the film, although that didn't really hurt. But let's talk about the psychology found in the film. And I've actually written about Star Wars psychology before in a book called Star Wars Psychology, Dark Side of the Mind, edited by Travis Langley. And I wrote in that book an article about samurais, Jedis, and underdogs. And if you check out our Shrink Tank website, you'll also find an article highlighted Rogue One, Star Wars, and the psychology of an underdog. And that's really what I want to focus on today is moral development. Basically, how somebody finds moral reasoning and values to do something in the face of astronomical odds, because that's really what this film centers around. What are the chances that this team of rebels can steal the Death Star plans and come out alive, let alone be successful? And so Lawrence Kohlberg was an American psychologist, and he built off of Piaget's stages of cognitive development, and he came up with something called moral development. And it has 3 different levels, and we're going to kind of look at some of those and how it plays out with what our characters go through in this film. So level 1 is preconventional morality. And preconventional morality really focuses on an individual's self-interest before they really learn about moral conventions or care about others. So in the original Star Wars, that would represent Han Solo, where he asks point blank, what is in it for me? And in the new film, you see that even with Jyn Erso, where even though she's being recruited to join the rebels, in her mind, she is a loner, and she's not really someone that wants to align herself with a greater cause. But as the story becomes more personal and as the stakes become more realized that this fully operational Death Star will mean the destruction of the entire galaxy, Jen, along with others, begin to step out of pre-conventional morality, what's in it for me, and they start to think more in a conventional or post-conventional morality. And at that point, it's really where they start to look at right or wrong, taking precedence over society's view or how things have always been. And that's what you really see with Captain Cassian Andor and Jyn Erso, where they even defy the rebellion's decision not to strike at the Death Star and not to try to steal the plans, because they believe that the odds are too astronomically stacked against them. But the small team decides that they're going to go basically on a suicide mission to steal the Death Star plans. And so that's where you see this idea of moral reasoning in the movie. But then you also ask, well, what does it take for somebody that's willing to put their own life at risk for a greater cause? And so with that, we might look a little bit more towards positive psychology. And positive psychology, some people have a big misrepresentation that it really focuses on just happiness and hedonism, where in reality, positive psychology really focuses on what are those aspects and attributes of life that make life meaningful and worthwhile for people. And so when you think about Rogue One, a Star Wars story, what would cause somebody to really put their own life at risk, even though the odds are stacked against them? And there's really 2 key things, apart from just justice and moral development, that might indicate why someone would do something like the team does in Rogue One. The first would just be courage, that they have this courage, that fear, they're not going to be guided by fear. And fear oftentimes really is about our own personal threat, to where this team puts themselves repeatedly in harm's way. And it takes courage for them to face these odds and the opposition of breaking into a rebel base. The second is humanity, and with it specifically suffering. So even though Jyn Erso and Captain Cassian Andor and the other people on their team, they could just go with the rest of the rebellion and try to find other political means of working with the Empire, they really can't reconcile the suffering that's going to occur when this Death Star becomes fully operational. And so their courage and humanity, their love of humanity, and they can't accept suffering of innocence, compels them to act in a way where they put their own life at risk. And then the final thing that the movie really hits home about when you face these astronomical odds, when you are the underdog, is what type of hope that you have. And, Jen Erso and Cassian Andor say in the movie, rebellions are built on hope. And that's the other theme of positive psychology and even mental health is hope. This belief that things can change, that things can be better, and that you have the capability to orchestrate the change. And this film does a beautiful job illustrating that psychological principle of hope. So I really enjoyed Rogue One, and I think at times people might dismiss how much psychology is really found in the Star Wars film and even in the Star Wars universe. So I highly recommend you check out the book, Star Wars Psychology, edited by Travis Langley. I also encourage you to look on Shrink Tank and look at my article I wrote specifically about Rogue One psychology, and I'll go a little bit more into detail with what we talked about here. But that's it for today, and I appreciate you joining us. Let me know if there's anything I missed or anything that you disagree with the psychology when we're looking at Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Be sure to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. You can also follow me on Twitter. My handle is @jhedderly. And be sure to check out the podcast, the Shrink Tank Podcast, where I participate with other psychologists in a roundtable discussion looking at psychology and our popular culture. Until next time, this is Jonathan Hedderly, and thanks for watching.
Synopsis.com